thank you, Brahmaprana, and thank you all the devotees. It's a great joy to see you on the screen. At least there's a great joy. Now, the subject as introduced is Srimad Bhagavatam. So I shall say a few things about this very interesting spiritual classic, which is considered to be the most profound and the most important devotional classic of Hindu Vedantic heritage. In fact, as a devotional classic, it ranks much higher than Bhagavad Gita or Narada Bhakti Sutras, Shandilya Bhakti Sutras, and so on, because it is very philosophical and very devotional. The beginning and the end of this text is surprisingly Advaitic. But the text is all about devotion. So that's why, Sri Ramakrishna says, the highest devotee and the highest jnani at the experience level are the same. Now, in our Hindu tradition, there are three fundamental categories, three levels of canonical literature. The Vedas, called the Shrutis, then the Smritis, and the Puranas. Of these, Puranas are the least important, and the Vedas are the most important. But at the same time, Bhagavata Purana has got something unique about it, because Bhagavata is considered to be equal to the Vedas. Idam Puranam Brahma Samhidam, that means it is as profound, it is equal to the Vedas. Coming to the text itself, the author is Vyasa. In fact, we are going to talk about him because the entire spiritual psychology of this text is built around this personality of Vyasa and how Vyasa came to write this unique classic. It has got 18,000 verses divided into 335 chapters, which again divided into 12 sections, which is called a skandha or book. This is the landscape of this unique text. It deals with Lord Krishna, mainly is the Avatara Varishtha according to Bhagavata tradition, and other incarnations of Mahavishnu. Bhagavata is considered to be unique because it fulfills not only the fundamental criteria for a great Purana, but also the fundamental criteria for a great spiritual classic. So there is a well-known, this a sloka, Sargascha Pradisargascha Vamsho Manandiranisha Vamshanu Chaiva Puranam Panchalakshanam. 5 conditions that define a great Purana. Sargascha Pradisargascha Vamsho Manandiranisha Vamshanu Chaiva Puranam Panchalakshanam. 5 important characteristics of a Purana. It deals with history, creation, evolution, descriptions of dynasties, kings and sages and common people. It also deals with, of course, devotion and the incarnations of Vishnu. But Bhagavata Purana is much more profound. So, Atra Sargo Visargascha Sthanam Bhushanam Mudeka Manandra Ishanu Katha Nirodhu Mukti Rasreha. Bhagavata deals with one unique subject, that is Mukti, liberation. So what is Mukti or liberation? what is the ultimate goal of human existence? What is the fundamental purpose of human life? What is that which makes our life meaningful and relevant? In fact, that's the very essence of this text. So that will take you to the story of the author himself, Vyasa. You know, Vyasa is the most prominent figure among the authors of books or spiritual classics in Hindu tradition. All the 18 Upapuranas, all the 18 Mahapuranas are his creation. Plus, Vyasa's Smriti is his own book on certain rules and regulations that define our life in society, in our individual life, and also in family life. And also some of the values that should govern our everyday activities. And also he is the author of the Badarayana Sutras, Brahma Sutras. He was the one who edited the Veda, the original Veda, into 4 categories. It is said that in early days, there was only one Veda. And what Vyasa did, the Vyasa Dhatu means editing, classifying. It's the real meaning of the Sanskrit root Dhatu, from which the word Vyasa himself emerges. So what he did, and what he is most well known for in Hindu tradition, is that he was the one who edited the original Veda into 4 canonical traditions: Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, and Atharva Veda. All these have some relevance closely linked to the spiritual psychology of Bhagavata Purana. That's why I'm giving this background. So this great author, philosopher, saint, and sage who ran many monasteries, who taught many sages, Vedas, and other spiritual literature. He had 4 disciples: Paila, Jaimini, then Sumantu, and the great author who actually followed this Yajurveda tradition. His name was Vaishambhai. So what he did, one section of the original Veda he taught to Paila, that is Rigveda. Another section he taught to Jaimini, the Samaveda. Another section he taught to Vaishambhai, and I became Yajurveda. And another section he taught to Sumantu. These are his 4 disciples. It became Atharva Veda. Now, can you imagine such a man facing what you may right now call withdrawal symptoms, depression, melancholy, grief? That was the condition of Vyasa. The most accomplished man of those days, the greatest sage and sages, himself was unhappy, depressed. He felt that there was something losing, there was something that was losing every minute. His life is not complete. So one day he was sitting on the banks of the river Saraswati. At that time, another sage happened to come there. In fact, he was contemplating on his problem, this great man Vyasa. I have written all these great books. I have many great sages and sages who are my own disciples. And you know, the Mahabharata itself was his creation. That's an important part of this discussion that we are going to begin very soon. In spite of all that, he was unhappy. And he was thinking, what should be the reason? Then an idea occurred in his mind. He thought that, well, I have written the Mahabharata, I have classified the Vedas, I have written Upapuranas and Mahapuranas. You know, if you have got a big shelf in your room, and if you want to fill that shelf, You can fill your huge bookshelf with Vyasa's books. You don't have to look elsewhere. If you collect all of his works, that'd be enough to fill one huge bookshelf. And if you include the commentaries, that'll be enough to maybe to fill one huge library. If you go to any Sanskrit library, manuscript library, anywhere in the main manuscript libraries in India, if you go to Baroda, if you go to the Trivandrum Manuscript Library, if you go to Adayar Manuscript Library, where you find, if you have got a huge collection of books somehow related to Vyasa. So he said, but something he missed, something that he didn't do, which explains why he was unhappy. And he said, maybe I did not really write anything about Lord Vishnu. I did not write anything about how an individual can reach God, how he can experience a kind of inner fulfillment. If I write it, I'll be okay. If you do something that gives peace, tranquility, and solace to others, then you also will get a little bit of that peace and tranquility. Anyway, so there is the discussion. There is a dialogue between sage Narada and Vyasa. Now, here, after seeing Vyasa in this depressed mood, Narada is asking, Jijñāsidam adhītam ca brahma yatta sanatanam athapi shojasya atmanam akritartha iva prabho. So Narada is asking, see, you have accomplished all this. You have written all these great books. You have discussed dharma, artha, kama in all these spiritual literature. But your akritartha, as well as Sanskrit word, akritartha actually means a person who feels that he has not done or he has not attained what he should have done and what he should have attained. Now that is, in fact, that's why people don't get sleep. You know, they may be the richest industrial captains of the world, maybe the big CEOs. They have to take 4 or 5 pills a day to get 2 hours sleep. That's because they have this akritartha. Kritarthada and kritagrityada. These are 2 words in Sanskrit. Kritagrityada means, well, feeling, well, I have done something that I should have done, that I ought to have done. Kritartha means I have obtained something that makes my life meaningful. So Vyasa was akritartha. You are sitting like a depressed person, like a person who feels that his life has gone waste. That's a terrible experience. In fact, that is the biggest malady, worse than COVID. COVID will come and go, but this problem will not disappear. It has been there right from the last 7,000 of years. It was there when Christ was born, when Buddha was born. It is also right there in front of us. Every day you find people akritartha, the richest nations, the most well-established welfare societies, the highest degree, the highest percentage of depression and suicides. Societies and nations that have reached highest degree of perfectionism. The trains run on time, planes run on time, your pension papers are processed on time, but the highest rate of suicides and depression. So that's why akritartha. Now, that's a question that Narada is asking. Why do you look so depressed? Then Vyasa himself said, I am reciting some of these wonderful verses because otherwise it will look like a storytelling, which I believe is not a way of doing justice to the unique classic that we are supposed to deal with. So I have to quote some of these Sanskrit verses. Then Vyasa says, Asteva me sarvam idam toyoktam tathapi natma paridushyade me tan moolam avyaktam agadha bhudam prachamahe tum atma bhudam. So he says, well, What you said is correct. I don't feel this kind of inner fulfillment. Now tell me what I should do. And then Narada said something very interesting. Look here, Vyasa. You wrote all the wonderful books. And you know, the biggest and maybe the most well-known contribution of Vyasa to world literature is Mahabharata. In its larger version, it has got almost 145,000 verses. In its shortest version, more than 100,000 verses, which means 13 times if you multiply the works of the Homer and Iliad, that is Vyasa's Mahabharata. Hundreds of dialogues, very profound dialogue. Bhagavad Gita itself is a tiny fraction of Mahabharata. But in Mahabharata, what he did? He did not tell you what you should do to get a little peace of mind. He did not discuss the ultimate goal of human life. He did not discuss bhakti. He did not discuss liberation, mukti, which is a unique feature of Bhagavatam as an important Purana, which you don't find so elaborately discussed in other Puranas. So Narada says, look here, you have written all these books in the Mahabharata, which is supposed to be your magnum opus. What you discuss, dharma, artha, and kama. Because Bhagavad Gita contains mukti, of course, no doubt. But you know, in the thick forest of Mahabharata, Bhagavad Gita remained obscure and unknown before Shankaracharya took it out of Mahabharata. I wrote a commentary in the 8th century AD. Before Shankaracharya wrote a commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, that book was not even known as a prominent work of spiritual literature anywhere in India. That's something we should remember. It was Shankaracharya's magical touch that converted Bhagavad Gita into a spiritual classic. Because in the Mahabharata itself, there are so many other Gitas, which are some of them even more profound than Bhagavad Gita. See, Vyadha Gita is there, Uttara Gita is there, many other Gitas are very profound poems. So, Bhagavad Gita, you may ask a question. Bhagavad Gita deals with bhakti. 12th chapter is Bhakti Yoga, and 6th chapter is Dhyana Yoga. The bhakti is very much mentioned in the Gita. The explanation is Gita was practically an obscure book, not so much well known before Shankaracharya came in 8th century AD and wrote a commentary on the Bhagavad Gita. Tadidam Gita Shastram Samasta Vedartha Sangraha Bhudam Durvikeyartham. Bhashyakara says, this Gita contains the essence of all the Vedas and Upanishads. The essence. That is how he wrote the commentary. So coming back to the subject, Vyasa listened to Narada. Narada says, you wrote about dharma. The most important theme of Mahabharata is dharma. Dharma, if you know about dharma, that's okay, how you should run your family, you should pay your taxes, because you should be a law-abiding citizen, you should practice dharma, Raja Dharma, you should honor. And there are, you know, Pancha Mahayajna, Bhudayajna, Dhruvayajna, all these duties, responsibilities of an householder. He should honor the guest, he should honor the teacher, he should look after his relations, he should be kind to, compassionate to animals, you know. So all these are mentioned, Bhudayajna, all these are mentioned in the Pancha Mahayajna. It's part of dharma. And then every person has his own dharma. Raja Dharma, Dhruva Dharma, etc. Every householder, every king, every saint, everyone has his own dharma, his own duty, his own conduct, his own rules of conduct. Everyone has got. But that dharma is about neutral. It's like a constitution. If you read Mahabharata, you find Duryodhana himself has his own justification for all his evil actions. And if you listen to him, if he can get a good attorney, Duryodhana will get scot-free. Just like Hitler justifying all the terrible things he did. He had his own justification. So dharma is not ultimate value. Dharma has depicted in the Mahabharata. We should remember it is different from the Dharma ideal preached in the Buddhist tradition. That's an important point, remember. Dharma discussed in the Mahabharata is different and much narrower in scope than the Dharma ideal that you find in the Buddhist tradition, where is the highest spiritual ideal. So, Narada tells Vyasa, you wrote these more than 100,000 verses to depict Dharma. Okay, fine. So if you read Mahabharata, you find all the terrible characters in Mahabharata. They have their own justifications for all the terrible things that they teach. So what it means is that's not enough. That doesn't tell you what you should do to experience your own spiritual fulfillment, to reach your own spiritual fulfillment, to have a feeling of meaningfulness in our own inner life. Dharma is necessary, but that's not enough. So, what Narada says is, Jugupsidam dharma krude anushasataha sabhava rektasya mahan vitikrama yat vakyado dharma iti darastido na manyade tasya nivaranam jana. Of course, there is a great commentator on the Bhagavata Purana. His name is Sridharacharya. He says, Tadevam Karyasho Vina Bharatadishu Kudam Dharmadi Varnanam Akinjit Karamityuktam Jugupsidam Nindyam Kamyakarmadi Tatra Subhavada Eva Rektasya Anuraginaka Purusasya Dharma Krudi Dharmartham Anushasataham Prayaradavas Tava Mahanayam Vidikramo Anyayaka. Terrible words. That's what Narada says. All right. You discuss in the Mahabharata this Varnasama, what people should do according to their own social status, their position in society and family, what a person should do, how he should conduct himself, and how he should be a law-abiding citizen, a responsible family man, a responsible member of society. So you have to practice your dharma. But that dharma also includes kama karmas also. You see, you do something to obtain some material benefit. How to do that? That is also included in the Mahabharata. How to make wealth, how to fight for your country, for your nation, for your society, and how to be an ideal king, how to conquer your enemies. All these responsibilities and duties of people belonging to different classes of society, the king, the ministers, the priests, all these are mentioned in the Mahabharata. Now, Narada says, any description of these duties and responsibilities without a spiritual content is empty. It should have a spiritual content. Dharma is, in a way, called constitutional correctness. What is constitutionally right may be ethically wrong, spiritually wrong. The Constitution doesn't necessarily guarantee ethical or spiritual uprightness. That's an important point to remember. Frequently, a constitution can violate ethical, moral, and spiritual values. What is constitutionally right may be ethically wrong, spiritually wrong. So, unless you bring a spiritual element, unless you bring bhakti, unless you bring a message that every individual can follow to reach God, to experience the reality of God through the path of bhakti, without this essential teaching, all these elaborate discussions of dharma, just like empty pond, filthy water, which you cannot drink, which you cannot take bath in, which you cannot preserve, You may use it for cleaning, maybe washing your clothes. That's all. So there are very strong expressions in the section which I'm not going to discuss elaborately. So what Narada says is, whatever you have done, whatever you have discussed, whatever you have written about dharma, that is not enough. Because you did not give something to people that will give them peace of mind, you are yourself deprived of peace of mind. So do something that will help others to obtain peace of mind, then you will get peace of mind. So after listening to this, Vyasa wrote this unique book, Bhagavata Purana. And Satyam Param Dhimahi, that's the last word in the Dwadasa Skandha. When he wrote the last word of Bhagavata Purana, he felt great contentment, joy, and happiness. This is the important spiritual and psychological aspect of Bhagavata Purana. So, any literature, any work of art, of intellect, of genius will be inadequate, will not serve the ultimate purpose of human life unless it contains some spiritual message. Well, if you look at the great classics of the world, say maybe the greatest novels, Dostoevsky's Brothers Karamazov, Tolstoy's War and Peace, any of these books you take, they depict the misery, the horror, the tragedy, the pathos of human life. But they themselves were never very happy. Dostoevsky perhaps did not have 4 hours of sleep any day, any time in his whole existence. So what do you want to mean? Or Tolstoy, or anyone, Freud, they were great geniuses. They were men of intellect. They wrote great things, like Vyasa, of course, in a different level. But that will not give you peace of mind. On the other hand, if you read the Sermon on the Mount, if you read the Upanishad, the Bhagavad Gita, the Dhammapada, if you read them, you get it contains a message. Those books connect with your mind, and those books give you something that will make your life meaningful, and you feel a kind of inner relevance of your own life. So any great work of art, literature, music, anything, if it is totally empty of any spiritual content, it has no value, it has no worth. This is the view of Bhagavata Purana. I don't mean to say that they are bad, without any relevance or without any importance. What I mean to say, they will have a permanent spiritual value if those books, if those works contain a spiritual element. So when Vyasa wrote this wonderful book, he himself became contented, happy, and his mind became calm and quiet. Now, there are many other episodes in the Bhagavata itself. Bhagavata itself is the great classic. We recommend this 9-fold bhakti. Sravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasim, Sakhyam, Atmanivedanam, etc. Now, if you listen to holy names, if you read holy names, if you remember the holy name, if you read holy books, if you have contact with holy persons, that will give you a sense of spiritual meaningfulness, a kind of inner spiritual fulfillment. Without that, nothing will happen. Unless a person is able to imbibe a spiritual message as a guiding light that always remains kindling, lighting with his own heart, his life will become totally meaningful. Another very interesting story that we find in the Bhagavata Purana is about Parikshit, the king Parikshit. Parikshit was the grandson of Arjuna. Arjuna's son Abhimanyu, Abhimanyu's son Parikshit. He was a great king, and his well known as a noble, as an ideal ruler, as a compassionate person who looked after his kingdom and his subjects very well. Now, one day he was traveling, he was walking in the forest, and he became tired. He became very hungry and thirsty. And as he was walking, he found a small, tiny hermitage. In that hermitage, an old saint was sitting, immersed in meditation, without being aware of what was happening around him. So this King Parikshit, he was a very noble-hearted person who normally will not do anything wrong, but he was very hungry and very thirsty. And he entered this hermitage and he asked for a little water to drink. And he found this old sage. He was sitting immersed in meditation. He didn't know the king has entered his hermitage looking for water, fully tired and thirsty and hungry. The king thought that the sage was neglecting him. His name was Shamika. The sage was deliberately ignoring him. That's because he was so hungry and so thirsty. That unsettled his mind. So he got angry. And then he looked around and he took a dead snake with the bow, at the edge of the bow, and he put it on the neck of this sage and went away. Now, after some time, this sage's son came to know of this incident. Now, remember, I need some explanation. Sages are not necessarily monks. They are mostly retired householders. If you read the Vedas and the Upanishads, Uddalaka, Shetaketu dialogue, if you read, and there are many Panchala, Shupati, there are many sages in the Upanishadic Vedic literature. All of them are not monks. Most of them are retired householders. In ancient tradition, there was a belief that every householder, when he becomes old, he should not remain in his home. Rather, the old husband and wife should retire to some forest hermitage and spend the rest of their lifetime in meditation, in imparting Vedas, and so on. Grihasthatsu yada pasyed bali palidam atmanaha apatyasya apatyam tada aranyam samasriyet. When an householder sees that his hair is getting gray, maybe his teeth is getting black, and his cheeks are getting wrinkled, instead of reversing the metabolism, I mean, whitening the teeth and blackening the hair, he should retire to a forest hermitage and spend the rest of the lifetime, both husband and wife, and spend the rest of the lifetime in meditation. So this Shamika was such a sage. So his son came to know what had happened, and his son got angry and he put a curse on the king who had perpetuated this terrible thing, this putting the dead snake on the neck of the old sage. Within 7 days from now, he'll be bitten by a snake and he will die. Within 7 days from now. Now, Parikshit came to know of this. And he did not get angry with the sage or his son who put the curse on him. Rather, because he was a great philosopher king, though he made a mistake, did a blunder because he was thirsty, but still he became aware of what terrible mistake he did, and he became repentant, and he repented, and he left his kingdom as an act of repentance. He called his younger son Janamejaya, made him the next king, and he went to the banks of river Ganga. Sad, he decided to spend the rest of his lifetime in meditation. So there is in the Bhagavata Purana, there is a very famous Sanskrit verse in which Parikshit expresses his desire to relinquish his kingdom. Addevarajam Belamurdhagosham Pragobida Brahmagulanalo me Dakatu Abhadrasya Punar Name Abhud Papiyasi Dhir Dijadeva Gopya. He says, I did something absolutely heinous, terrible thing I did, putting the dead snake on the neck of this great sage. I deserve punishment. And I got the punishment. I got this curse. So now, for the rest of my lifetime, I will spend in meditation and in spiritual practices. With this strong vow, he went to the bank of river Ganga and sat there, meditating on Lord Vishnu, meditating on God and reading scriptures, because he knew he had only 7 days to live. What will a person do if he comes to know that he had only 7 days to live? His heart may break, or he may withdraw all the money from the bank and go to Hawaii and Las Vegas and spend the rest of that time in luxurious life, depending upon his temperament. But this king was a great philosopher king. He was Rajarshi. He was very noble-hearted person. So he remembered one important teaching. He said, every obstacle for a devotee, every obstacle in his life is a blessing in disguise. If he has an obstacle, if he loses money, devotee should remember it is a warning that comes from God. Remember, you have something much higher to aspire for than wealth. If he loses his health, it's a reminder from God that he should aspire for something higher than the physical health. Yasya anugraham ichchami tasya vittam haramiham bandhavaisa viyogena visham bhavati dukkhidaha tena dukkhena samtaptu yadimam na parityajet tam prasadam karishyami yad lokayavi sudurlabham. What means is, a devotee thinks as if God has a special place, grace for him. That's why he loses his money, he loses his wealth, he loses his health. Everything is a reminder of the fact of a higher goal in spiritual life, higher and transcendental spiritual goal in our life. So Parikshit remembered this. So he went to the banks of river Ganga, sat there, silent in meditation. Many sages came to know of this incident and they praised Parikshit. Instead of getting angry with the sage or his son who put a curse on him, he took it as a blessing in disguise, as a special act of grace from God, designed to remind him of a higher purpose in life. You can imagine, suppose we have absolutely no problem in life, we'll become morons or we'll become automatic machines, really speaking. Unless we have some difficulty, some obstacle, some problem, we will not be reminded of the limitation of our physical existence. We will mistake our physical existence as the ultimate goal of human life. So when we have a problem, it could be maybe losing money in the bank, it could be losing health, it could be some kind of a strange reminder of a higher purpose in life. Without that, many people will not take to higher life. Think of Buddha. Buddha was living a luxurious life in his palace. So one day he was being taken out on the streets of the town Lumbini, and he saw a dead body being taken to the cremation ground, and he saw a sick man, an old man. So dark realities of life, like old age, sickness, and death, were brought home to him. So suddenly he remembered, oh, every human being will one day become old, maybe sick, and certainly will die. And then he saw the face of a sage who had realized this truth. He wanted to be like him, and he left his kingdom. And you know what happened? He became the great Buddha, the enlightened one. It's not that misery is essential or indispensable, but some activity, some experience that reminds you of the limitation of the empirical, the worldly existence. Without that reminder, which frequently can be a very unpleasant way of a reminder, or it could be sometimes very normal. Without that, people may not be able to remember the reality of higher spiritual possibilities. So in the case of Parikshit, he was a reputed king. You have to remember, he was the grandson of Arjuna himself, who was the student of Lord Krishna. So not a normal person, very enlightened person. But even he lost his balance, and he did a terrible deed, taking the dead snake and putting it in the neck of the old sage. So what happened? He thought with the right attitude, and he wanted to spend his rest of his lifetime in meditation and japa and spiritual practices. At that time, Vyasa's son Shuka came there. And Shuka was the greatest sage of those times. When Shuka came to the banks of river Ganga to meet Parikshit, Parikshit asked him one question. Ada prichami samsiddhim yoginam paramam gurum purusha sehayat karyam priyamanasya sarvata. What should a dying man do? What should a person do if death stares at him? Suppose you know you have only 7 days to live. How to live in an intelligent manner? How to live like a wise man, so that you have a natural, graceful exit, not a turbulent, disturbed exit, but a graceful exit. That is the question that Parikshit puts before Shuka. And then he continues his question. Yasodhavyam atho japyam yat kartavyam dhruvi prabhu smartavyam bhajaniyam va bruhi yadva viparreya. So yasodhavyam, kartavyam, and bhajaniyam, and so on. What should I listen to? What should I remember? How I should perform my spiritual practices? How should I conduct myself for the rest of my lifetime? And what I should not do. So there are two questions here. What I should do and what I should not do. What should a person do if he comes to know that he has just a few years ahead of him? Or what he should not do. In answer to this, Shuka Brahmashi expounds the entire Bhagavata story. This comes in the 19th chapter of the first skandha. Up to 12th skandha end, Shuka Brahmashi, the great Shuka, he expounds the entire Bhagavata Purana. In other words, Bhagavata Purana is actually a kind of a masterpiece in spiritual counseling, actually. It contains everything. First of all, if you read Bhagavata Purana, you feel that you have just entered the main freeway that will take you to your spiritual destination. There are other books. Other books are there, by-lanes and highway. Other also may be tiny by-lanes. Sometimes it may take you to opposite direction also. But Bhagavata Purana is the right royal highway, the freeway that takes you to your spiritual destination. In answer to this, Shuka Brahmashi, in the next section, he begins his question, Variya neshate prasna krudo loka hidam dhruva atmavi sammada pumsam sodavyadishu yapara. First of all, the great sage Sukha congratulates Parikshit for asking this very intelligent question. In fact, to ask an intelligent question, you should be a mature person. And then first, Shuka gives an answer to the second part of the question. What a person should not do. Then he says, normally people, every day, millions of people, millions of animals, millions of creatures are entering the abode of death. Ahanya bhudani. There's a famous slogan, Mahabharata itself. Gachantiha yamalaya. Every day we are seeing that this human body, even if you eat well, exotic organic food, and do exercise every day, then also you may perhaps live maybe 110 years. That's a tall order. But even then, one day you have to go away. If a crematorium manager will forget the moment he returns home, every day he is seeing this dead body being pushed through the tube, but he thinks that he is going to live forever. What we normally understand intellectually doesn't translate into emotional, spiritual conviction. We forget that the moment we come out. So Sudha says, every day, every minute, if you look around, if you read newspapers, we are seeing in front of us this stark reality that this world, with all its wonderful things, is impermanent. It is not absolutely real in the sense it won't remain there all the time. Still we forget. Therefore, in the 6th sloka, Shuka gives the answer to the question, what a person should do. Edavan Sankhya Yoga Abhyam Swadharma Parinishthaya Janma Labha Parapumsam Ante Narayana Smriti. You practice Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, or whatever you want. But you should be able to leave this world with a smile on your face, remembering God's name in your heart. If you look back, and you should be able to look back and smile at your own past deeds, your own past words. There should be nothing in your life that makes you feel repentant. You should not have done it. You should not have spoken it. So that's why Ante Narayana Smriti. That's the ultimate goal of human existence. One should be able to leave this world, then remembering the name of the Lord. That is the ultimate answer. And as an interpretation, as an exposition of this great ideal, Shuka continues teaching the entire Bhagavata Purana. Shuka got it from his own father Vyasa. Vyasa got it from Parashara. And there is a tradition, Bhagavata Parampara there is a multiple Parampara tradition of Bhagavata lineage. The original Bhagavata was taught by Lord Mahavishnu himself to Brahma. Brahma taught it to Narada. Narada taught it to Vyasa. Vyasa taught it to Shuka. And also another disciple of Vyasa, Ramaharshan, also got it. And he started the tradition of the Naimisharanya tradition. So there are many traditions, many streams, many lineages in the Bhagavata tradition. But essence of Bhagavata is that it is a royal highway. It is our own spiritual home, our own spiritual realization. Should I stop now? Is there any Q&A? If you want, I shall continue for 10 minutes longer. Is there any Q&A or anything? No, perhaps.
No, nothing's coming through, Swami. No.
Okay. Then I shall conclude right now with a few minutes. Now, this great teaching of Bhagavata you find in other stories also. There are some very interesting stories that use the real essence of this. Another interesting story is the story of Ajamila. Ajamila was a was a nice person, born in a good family, was brought up as a God-fearing, an ideal son. But what happened as he became an adult, he had a deviation in his life. He began to live the life of a profligate. And then the time came for him to leave this world. His death was approaching. At that time, he got terrified. The Bhagavata Purana tells you the story. That is, the Yamadutas came to take him to hell. At that time, he remembered his son's name. You know, he had a good culture, good lineage, good tradition. So he had given his elder son the name of Narayana, which actually is synonym of Lord Vishnu. So he was so helpless. He could not bring himself to think of God, but he could think of his son's name, which as a coincidence happened to be Narayana, the synonym of Lord Vishnu. He called his son. Immediately, his mind went back to his younger days when he was growing up as a responsible, ideal son, as a God-fearing boy. He used to chant this holy name Narayana. Immediately, his mind underwent a complete change, and Vishnu came and took him to Vishnu Loka. There are many such stories in the Bhagavata Purana. It means if a person practices little spiritual discipline anytime in his life, his saddha and seriousness, that will become a saving factor that will eventually take him to higher spiritual destination. And in the 11th skandha, there's a long dialogue between a great king called Nimi and 9 sages. A very profound discussion. In this dialogue, you find some of the most profound topics on spiritual philosophy are discussed. How to conduct our life, everyday life, what is bhakti, how to get across Maya, and how to do spiritual disciplines in this Kali Yuga. So many discussions are there. But one important discussion, who is an ideal devotee of God? In fact, Kavir Antariksha Prabuddha Pipalayana Abhihotroda Dumilas Chamasak Karabhajanaka. 9 sages, Kavi, Hari, Antariksha, Prabuddha, Pipalayana, Abhihotra, and so on. These 9 sages were visiting King Nimi in his court. Then the king put some questions to them. But one of the questions was this: who is a real devotee of God? You may expect the answer. Somebody who goes to the temple every day or a church every day, who performs a lot of rituals every day, who puts this vibhuti in a sandal paste, rudrakshas, all that. These are ideal devotee. No, that's the answer. The answer is Sarva Bhudeshu Yapashid Balibaridamatmanaga Apatyasya. That's the famous sloka is there, means Sarvabhudeshu yapashit Bhagavad Bhavam Atmanaga Bhudani Bhagavadi Atmani Esha Bhagavatam. This is one of the most profound teachings of Bhagavad Purana. Sarvabhudeshu yapashit Bhagavad Bhavam Atmanaga Bhudani Bhagavadi Atmani Esha Bhagavatam. That Esha Bhagavadanam Uttamah. This person is the highest devotee of God. Who is that person? The one who sees the presence, the reality of God in everyone, in everything, and the one who sees everyone and everything in God. In fact, this verse is a vindication of the view of Siddharacharya and many other commentators. to say that Bhagavata classic is a declaration of the fact that at the experience level, the highest devotee and the highest Advaita, both are the same. Sarva Bhudeshu Yap Pashyed Bhavamatmana. You should be able to see God in everything. And then you should be able to see the essence of God in everyone. Everyone should be seen in God, and God should be seen in everything. Shankaracharya says in the Gita Bhashya, he says, here after discussing what is the highest devotion, Maicha Ananya Yogena Bhakti Ravivicharini Vivikta Desha Sevitum Anabhirjana Samsat. Shankaracharya defines Avibhijarini Bhakti, the pure, achala, nirmala, the unwavering, the pure devotion. He goes on to describe. Then he says, Sacha Jnanam. This highest, this pure devotion is the highest jnana. So at the experience level, highest devotion and the highest Advaitic experience are the same. This is a great declaration in the Shankaracharya's commentary on the Bhagavad Gita. Now, you can find in the Bhagavata Purana the same. Bhagavata Purana begins with Yadmadasyata, the Brahma Sutra, and ends with Satyam Param Dhimahi. At the same time, it contains some of the most profound hymns or stotras. There are very, very unique spiritual poetry in Bhagavata Purana. Wonderful poems inside Bhagavata Purana. Stotras, you find. These stotras, they begin at the Dveda level, pass through Visishta Dveda, and eventually end with the Advaitic experience of the non-distinction between the absolute reality God and also the devotee, the Lord and his bhakta, his devotee are essentially the same. So that's why Sarva Bhudeshu Pasyed Bhavad Bhavamatmanaha Bhudani Bhagavadi Atmani Esha Bhagavadottamaha. This is actually the reply given by Hari, one of the Navayogis. So I have tried to give you a very brief bird view of this great spiritual classic. It is the most profound and the most important spiritual classic of Vedantic Hindu devotional tradition. Thank you. Namaskar. It's a great joy to see all of you, though we are not able to see in person. Thank you. Namaskar.